Another pretty common metric used in web analytics is something called bounce rate. So go in and look in your data, and you'll notice under the columns totals, there's a value or a column called totals.bounces. What's a bounce? A bounce is when a user goes into your website and immediately leaves afterwards. Okay, so a bounce rate, what it is, it takes the total bounces, and you want to get the total visits, and you want to divide the total bounces by the total visits, and then I'll get you a bounce rate. High bounce rate is not a good thing. A low bounce rate is what you typically want. Now, in this case, what I want to do the bounce rate by is by source. So in a previous video, what we did is we took a look at the total visits that a source had. Google, so in other words, a user is coming from Google, YouTube.com, all these other websites as well. And it counted up all the visits. So what we're going to do is we're going to calculate the bounce rate by finding the totals.bounces column, the traffic source column, the total number of visits, and then also the total number of bounces. And we saw that in the other table. It gave us both of those values. So let's go ahead and get started. Let's go ahead and compose a query. Make sure to uncheck under show options, use legacy query. Just want to use standard SQL. I'm going to select, and we're going to select these columns. We want the traffic source dot source, comma, enter. We want to sum up the total number of bounces, so sum parentheses totals dot bounces, and I'm just going to call this column total bounces, comma, enter, and we're going to sum up total visits. As I'm going to call this one total visits. Okay, and then we're going to do another function that's going to calculate the bounce rate. Now remember, the bounce rate is bounces divided by visits. Okay, that's what we're going to define it as in this video. So we're going to take the sum. Actually, what we're going to do is just copy and paste. So we're going to take the sum, total number of bounces, right there, divided by that, and we're going to call that bounce rate. Now, where are we going to get these columns from? We're going to get it from our source. Okay. Oh, that's why it didn't show up. It's because I didn't do a from statement. Here we go. Okay, and then we want to filter out which tables in this data set we want to pull using the table suffix between. In this case, I just want to get the table of August of 2016, which is titled that, and of September of 2016. Okay. And let's see how we're doing so far. Yeah, we forgot our group by. I'm going to group it by source. Oh, excuse me. We're going to group it by traffic source.source, And I personally want to order this by total visits, descending order. Let's run the query, see what it gives us. Okay, so perfect. It grouped all the sources together. What it did is it took the total bounces for that source, the total visits for that source, and divided total bounces by total visits and gave us a bounce rate. Remember that a high bounce rate is not a good thing. So it looks like people who came to this e-commerce website from YouTube had a high bounce rate. Now you can also do this. You can also do an analysis on bounce rate, not by source, but maybe a good way to do it would be by device that they're using. So maybe you could take a look at your bounce rate for people on mobile devices, on tablets or desktops, to see maybe your design on your desktop view isn't working very well, or it just doesn't look very pleasing, so people don't want to be around it, or maybe that people accessing your website from mobile devices are seeing that the website is not as responsive or kind of clunky. So you can take a look, and maybe that's why you have a high bounce rate for those. And there's multiple ways you could do it for the bounce rate. In this movie we just did it by source, and we used aggregate functions in SQL to get there. Okay.